Alright, so we're going to be looking at the zero product property today, and that is actually something you probably have seen before. We're just going to say that if AB equals 0, well then A equals 0 and B equals 0. Now these aren't just numbers, these are actually product properties. So we're saying that if this guy, this guy equals 0 and this guy equals 0, then you split them apart. So when we're looking at number 1, if I want to do an example, okay, I have my A, this whole entire thing's my A, and this whole entire thing's my B. Well, it's saying if my A equals 0, and then times my B, and that's going to equal 0, I'm just going to split them apart. So I have 3x minus 2 equals 0, and then I'm going to have 7x plus 3 equals 0. I split them into two equations. Now I just solve. So I plus 2 on each side. I get 3x equals 2. And then I divide by 3 to get x alone, because the opposite of multiplying is dividing. And I get x equals 2/3. That is one answer. Then you go to your second function, and you have 7x plus 3 equals 0. I'm going to subtract 3 from each side. I get 7x equals negative 3. And now I divide each side by 7 to get x alone, and I get x equals negative 3/7. And so those are your two answers. Those are your two answers for your problem. Let's try one more example, shall we? Let's go to problem number 2. And so problem number 2, again, I have two products and they equal 0, so I'm just going to split them apart. So I'm going to have 3n minus 8 equals 0, and I'm going to have n plus 4 equals 0. That's a weird 4. All right, and now I'm just going to solve for n. So I plus 8 to each side. I get 3n equals 8, and then divide by 3 by each side. I get n equals 8/3. It is okay, and that's not a third. It is okay that it's a fraction. That's absolutely fine. It doesn't have to be a perfect whole number. Though when I go to this side, if I subtract 4 by each side, I get n equals a negative 4. I mean, it's okay to be a whole number. It's also okay to be a fraction. So if it turns out to be a fraction, do not think it is wrong. Now, what if I go down to number 3? All right, number 3 is a little bit different, but not too different. It actually is just saying that this part is your A and this part is your B. So I'm going to have V equals 0. That's my A, and wow, I'm done. Then I'm going to have V plus 3 equals 0. Now I just have to solve for V by subtracting 3 on each side. And so I get V equals negative 3. And those are my two answers. It's okay to have the V as its own answer. That's okay. You don't have to multiply it through or anything, and that would be your two answers. Now this is where it might get a little bit more tricky. Okay, I don't have two sections and I need to solve each equation by factoring. Well, if you guys remember, okay, factoring is where I have, my ax squared plus bx plus c and equals 0, and I split it into two equations, right? I split it into two equations. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just get everything on one side. So I'm going to add 5 and add 6n to both sides. And that you can do it in one step each, but I'm just doing in both. So I'm going to get n squared plus 5, although let me do 6n first, plus 5. And then these cancel out, and I end up getting 0 on one side. Now what I want to be able to do is factor it, and I don't know how many of you guys have learned this, but I know a lot of you might have learned the diamond method, where you're going to have something that times to the top, right, together. So it's going to have to multiply to 5 but add to 6. And so the two factors of 5 are 51 are 5 and 1, and so 5 and 1 add together do get 6. So I'm going to actually get n plus 5 to be one factor and n plus 1 to be my other factor to equal 0. Now I have actually my two factors. So I'm going to have n plus 5 equals 0, and I'm going to have n plus 1 equals 0. Now just solve for n. I'm going to subtract 5 from each side on this, and I get n equals negative 5. Subtract 1 on each side for this, and I get n equals negative 1. And here are my two factors. So let's just do one more let's do number 6. If I'm looking at number 6, I want to at least see if I can factor out anything, and I can, right? I can factor out a p. So if I factor out a p, I'm left with p plus 2 equals 0. Well, now I have my a and b. I can say p equals 0. All right, great, I'm done. Here's one answer. And then I have p plus 2 equals 0. All right, well, subtract 2 on each side, and you get p equals negative 2. That's your answer. Okay, let's just do one more of a factoring one where we have to use the diamond method. I just want to remind you guys how we're able to do that. And so if I'm looking at number 7, I want to drag this 7 over to the other side. And the way I could do that is by adding 7 to both sides. So I get x squared minus 8x plus 7, and that equals 0. Well, now the diamond method, okay? So when I do the diamond method, the numbers that I am choosing these two numbers. So the one that you need to multiply, this last number is going to go on top, and then this middle number is going to go on the bottom. So I have to find two factors of 7 that will add to negative 8, and those two factors are negative 1 and negative 7, right? Two negatives make a positive, so I have negative 1 and negative 7. So when I factor this, I'm going to have x squared, not x squared, my bad, it's just going to be, I'm going to have my parentheses, I'm going to have x, and my two factors I'm putting in are negative 1 and negative 7, and that equals 0. All right, so then I'm going to solve, and I have x minus 1 equals 0, and I have x minus 7 equals 0. And so I'm going to add 1 to each side, so you get x equals a positive 1, add 7 to each side, and x equals a positive 7. And so those are your two answers. Let's do one last one, let's do number 8. Okay, because I have this feeling, I know I'm not with you right now, but I just have this feeling that you're kind of forgetting, how to factor. So right now, I'm just going to do plus 5k to each side to get these to go away. I'm going to get k squared plus 5k minus 14 equals 0. And again, how I factor this is have my diamond, my negative 14 goes in the top, and then if you need, write a little tiny note. My negative 14 goes in the top, my positive 5 goes in the bottom. Now, what are two factors of negative 14? Didn't want that. What are two factors of negative 14 that get to you a positive 5? Well, if I'm looking at negative 14 and, I know it's going to be a positive 7 and a negative 2. Right? One of them has to be negative, one of them has to be positive. And you might have to go through a couple factors to be able to get that. So I'm going to fill in a 7 and a negative 2. Now, how I factor that is I'm going to have my k plus 7 times k minus 2 equals 0. Now split them up. I have k plus 7 equals 0, and then I'm going to have k minus 2 equals 0. For a k plus 7, I'm going to subtract 7 on each side. I get k equals a negative 7. For a k minus 2, I'm going to add 2 to each side, and I get a k equals a positive 2. And here are your two answers.